if you're going through difficulties, if you're questioning why, the obstacles, the setbacks, the circumstances, maybe you're in a storm right now and you just don't know why everything's happening. Guys, you don't want to miss this episode. I'm going to share a story with you that I believe that will change your life. Make sure you tune in. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Justin Ford podcast, where I'll be releasing life-changing principles and valuable information focused on all things faith, finance, family, fitness, real estate, and so much more. Let's go! What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Justin Ford podcast. Super excited for another episode to be with you here today. Guys, if you're loving the show, do me a favor. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really loving the show, do me a favor. Let me know about it. You can leave a 5-star review, or you can actually reach out to me directly. Or if you see me out and about, definitely love to hear your feedback. And I appreciate all of those of you that have given feedback. If you haven't followed me yet on social media, you can at the official Justin Ford. Again, at the official Justin Ford. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, X, and also here on YouTube. Got another great episode in store for you today. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by my friends over at Next Door Lending. Next Door Lending is a team of professionals that believe everyone should be treated as if they lived next door. The founders and team members have more than 150 years of combined loan experience, helping clients all over the country choose the best loan program to help you accomplish your goals. Next Door Lending is currently licensed in over 30 states and has a team of over 100 loan officers specializing in helping you get the best rate and terms. So whether you're looking to refinance your home or you're looking to purchase your next home, call my friends over at Next Door Lending today at 888-885-3667 or visit their website at nextdoorlending.com. Guys, I'm excited to be with you here today. Wanted to really share an encouraging episode with you today. For those of you guys that have read my book, I wrote a chapter on process. And I know, especially if you're a Christian right now, there are a lot of people going through this process. You may be experiencing difficulties. You may be experiencing setbacks. You may be experiencing obstacles, hard times, or maybe even feeling like things are going in the wrong direction. And I want you to be encouraged because many of us are feeling that way, and there really is a purpose behind it. You know, I've been learning a lot about really the times and seasons and also the different months based on the Hebrew calendar. And one of the ministries that I've been following really to learn more about really understanding, you know, the way that God founded things and set things up through through the Bible and through Israel back in the day is through Gloria Zion with Chuck Pierce. And I've been learning so much about it. And what it's been helping me to understand is where we are right now. There's a lot of things that are taking place in the atmosphere or the world around us where there's a lot of stuff going on. And what the devil would love for you to do is feel like you're in it alone. You're struggling by yourself and it's only you while everybody else around you is, everything's great. Well, I stay connected to a lot of people and really understanding what's going on. And a lot of people are experiencing very similar stuff, and it's for a reason. And I think it's because God is preparing you and me for what's ahead, right? He wants us to be more mature. He wants us to have character. He wants us to be processed. He wants us to be prepared. He wants us to be ready for that next place that he's taking us. And when you read the Bible, you see that God works in a certain way, and he does things a certain way, and he's been doing them for thousands and thousands of years. And so I've been on this journey of reading the Bible since January 1st through the year, right? The 365-day, it's called 1 Year Bible. And if you guys don't have the app, you can download the app. It's called Y-O-U version, so YouVersion. And what's incredible is it's the Bible at your fingertips, every version of the Bible, the whole Bible, like Bible studies. There's so much good stuff there. And one of the plans that I'm reading again is the Bible in 1 year. And so recently I was reading in the book of Genesis about Joseph. Now, If you've read my book, I talk about Joseph. If you've listened to my audiobook, I talk about Joseph in my chapter on process, understanding and knowing the process, knowing, understanding, and trusting the process. And so anytime I read Genesis, and especially on Joseph, I feel like it really speaks to me. And what's interesting is reading Genesis about Joseph within the last few weeks, God revealed some things to me even more than I understood before when I wrote a chapter in my book about it. And for those of you guys that don't know who Joseph was, he is the son of Jacob. So the Bible says Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Joseph. Jacob had 12 sons, and Joseph was the second to youngest son. And if you read through Genesis chapter 42, really starting in chapter 42, Joseph was, even 40, 41, Joseph was the most beloved son to Jacob out of his brothers. And his brothers despised him. They really despised him. They didn't like the fact that he was the most loved, and it was made known by his dad. Like, he was loved the most out of all his brothers. He was the youngest. So if you come from a large family, the youngest is usually the one that's most favored, kind of catches a break, is the one that maybe the parents, favor more. And the brothers, the other 11 brothers, did not like that, so much so that they plotted to kill their brother. They were going to kill him. And I'm sorry, I know I said Genesis. Let me go back a little bit. Hold on. I know I said 42, but it's really starts in chapter 37. And so they plotted to kill Joseph. And here's why. Because Joseph had a dream. He had a prophetic dream that God gave him, that at 17 years old, his dream was that he saw his brothers basically bowing down to him in this dream. And when Joseph shared the dream with them, it says they hated him even more. That's what the Bible says. It says they hated him even more because they were already upset with Joseph, right? They already didn't like Joseph. And so here he comes sharing this dream, and they don't like it. So it says they hated him even the more. And so they even said, then his brother says, "Are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And then he had another dream that he informed his brothers of, where his mom and his dad were actually bowing down to him as well. They are probably looking at this young 17-year-old kid as like arrogant, proud, haughty, all these things, when he could have been, right? He could have been playing this whole I'm the favorite and used it to rile his brothers up. Or he could have been just gullible and, doing it, not intentionally, but obviously, nonetheless, his brothers hated him. And so they plotted to actually kill Joseph. They were going to kill him. Here's what they said. It said, when they saw Joseph from a distance and before he came closer to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Here comes the dreamer." So they were actually like, looking at him as this dreamer and this, giving him a hard time. And, who does he think he is? And then it says in verse 20, "Now then, come and let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we will say, a vicious animal devoured him. Then we will see what will become of his dreams." When we have a dream, right, whether it's a vision, a dream, a prophetic word, when we're in pursuit of what it is that we're looking to accomplish in life, especially for God, you have to understand that opposition is going to come. It's going to come. And so when it does, you cannot be taken off guard and you cannot be surprised, because opposition is a part of the process. And so all of a sudden, here's Joseph. He's got the dream, and boom, opposition shows up. And guys, sometimes opposition shows up from the people that are closest to you. Sometimes opposition shows up from your family, your friends, your loved ones. And here Joseph's brothers are plotting to kill him because they're angry with him. And so then it goes about that his brothers are going back and forth, and one of the brothers stick up. His name is Reuben. He's like, no. We're not going to kill him. Let's just go ahead and throw him into a pit. and let him basically stay there. And so they threw him in this pit, verse 24, and took him and threw him in the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. And so now Joseph's down in this deep pit. Obviously, it has to be deep because he can't climb out of it. And you got to imagine, he's 17 years old, thrown into this pit by his brothers. They probably took a hold of him. They ripped off his coat and stripped him and throw him in this pit. Well, then all of a sudden, the brothers see that there's a caravan of people coming called the Ishmaelites. And when they were coming, they basically, the brother who was Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come and let us sell him." This is verse 27. "Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh," and his brothers listened to him. So obviously they were angry, they were frustrated, and that came to their senses like, why would we kill him? Let's just sell him. Okay. So they sell him into slavery to the Ishmaelites, and then the Ishmaelites then brought Joseph to Egypt. Now, Egypt, if you understand, is a foreign land. It at the time was a land that was very not godly, right? Very total the opposite of what they believed, what they followed, their morals, their character. So he gets taken to this unknown land. And when Joseph was taken into Egypt, you got to imagine, he's 17 years old. He's not like an adult. They basically set up his brother and basically took the coat that they ripped off him, put animal's blood on it, and went back to their parents and basically said Joseph was killed by a vicious animal. And then his dad, Jacob, went into just a big-time grieving process because, again, he loved Joseph the most. Then Joseph gets sold to Egypt to Potiphar. So Potiphar was Pharaoh's officer, which Pharaoh, imagine, was the ruler of the modern world at that time. He was one like the most powerful person there, and he was like the king of Egypt. And Potiphar was his captain, right? He was the captain of the bodyguard. And so Joseph gets sold to Potiphar. And so now you have this 17-year-old who's enslaved, right? And now he's with Potiphar. And Potiphar, because God was with Joseph, Potiphar could see it. And so Joseph became very favored and actually promoted Joseph in his house to basically second in command underneath Potiphar. So Joseph became like Potiphar's right-hand guy. And when he became Potiphar's right-hand guy, Potiphar could see that Joseph was favored, and God continued to favor Joseph even in the midst of this trial or this tribulation or this hard time, because Joseph didn't take his eyes off of the Lord. Okay, this is very important because I want to encourage you to, wherever you are right now and whatever you're going through, you have to keep your eyes fixed on the Lord, and you have to remain faithful. Regardless of the circumstances, regardless if you were taken advantage of, regardless if somebody did you wrong, you have to remain encouraged, and you got to keep moving forward, okay? Chapter 39, verse 1 says, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down here." And watch this. "And the Lord was with Joseph. So he became a successful man and was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now, his master, Potiphar, saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord made all that he did prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he owned." Okay? Now, this is pretty awesome. So even in the midst of this wrongdoing, Joseph gets promoted in his circumstance because he was faithful to God and he continued to keep his eyes fixed on the Lord. But what happens? Opposition shows up, right? And so Potiphar left Joseph in charge of everything that he owned. And Joseph, in verse 6, says he was very handsome in form and appearance. And it came about in verse 7, after these events, that his master's wife, Potiphar's wife, had her eyes on Joseph. You guys know what that means. And she said, "Sleep with me." But he refused, and he said to his master's wife, "Look, With me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put me in charge of all that he owns. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" So in this moment, temptation comes, because when you're on a path of pursuing what God has for you, obstacles are going to pop up, temptations are going to pop up, because the devil does not want you to finish the mission and the calling on your life, because the mission and the calling on your life is bigger than just you. It affects more people than just you. There are people in your future that are waiting for you to pursue the path that God's given you, to be faithful during the process, and to finish the race. And the devil knows that, because if the devil can stop you, he's going to stop all the people that you're meant to bless and help in your future. This is powerful, okay? So as Joseph acknowledged that he was not going to sleep with Potiphar's wife, she spoke to Joseph day after day, and he did not listen to her to lie with her, be beside her, or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the other people of the household were there. So she grabbed him by the garment and said, "Sleep with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and he ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to him, "See, he has brought a Hebrew to us to make fun of us. He came in to sleep with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside." So, and this is verse 16. So she left his garment beside her until the master came home. Then she spoke with him and said, "This Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to make fun of me. But when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Now, when his master Potiphar heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, this is what your slave did to me, his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Now again, here's Joseph, didn't do anything wrong. He's faithful. He's making the right decisions. He's honoring God, and then boom, he gets wronged again and thrown into prison. Very similar to the being put into the pit by his brothers and sold into slavery. And you have to imagine that as Joseph's sitting here, what's going through his mind? God, where are you? What's going on? Why does this keep happening to me? I'm doing the right thing. I'm making the right decisions. I'm being faithful to you. Like, what is going on? Can you imagine? Right? The 17-year-old, just living life, youngest son, probably, loving things, and boom, just has a dream. It wasn't even like him going out to start stuff. God gives him a dream. He shares the dream. His brothers despise him. His brothers want to kill him. They throw him in a pit. They sell him into slavery. All along, Joseph's doing the right thing. Then he gets purchased into slavery. God's with him. He gets promoted to be second under Potiphar, and then his wife wants to sleep with him. He says no. He does the right thing, and boom, now he's in prison. Think about your own life right now. Maybe you can relate to Joseph. What's going on in your life? Who's wronging you? Who's taking advantage of you? All the difficulties that you're experiencing. And so in verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor even in the sight of the warden of the prison. Just like he was when he first got sold into Egypt, now he's in prison, and because the favor of God is on Joseph, because Joseph has done the right thing, God says, you know what? I'm the one that has the final say here, and I'm going to extend kindness to you, and I'm going to give you favor with the warden. And so in verse 22, and the warden of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. Verse 23, the warden of the prison did not supervise anything under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and the Lord made whatever Joseph did prosper. Pretty interesting story, right? But it doesn't end there. And so I'll paraphrase this. So Joseph's in prison, and Pharaoh, who's now the highest in the land. So again, Potiphar was his bodyguard, but now Pharaoh is the ruler, right? He's the king of it all. He has a cupbearer and also a baker, okay? cupbearer and the baker, and they apparently offended Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh was furious with his two officials and threw them in prison. So the baker and the cupbearer are now in prison with Joseph. And the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. So, I mean, we're talking prison, right? Like back in the day, they didn't have TVs in prison. They didn't have air conditioning. Like prison had to have been just horrible back then. Not that it's good now, but at least there's modern, technology and things in prison. But back then it was probably like in a hole or a dungeon like you would see in old times. So then the cupbearer and the baker, they had this dream, and they basically had this dream, and Joseph overheard them talking about it, and they said to Joseph, "We had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it." And then Joseph said to them, "Do interpretations not belong to God? Tell it to me, please." So they tell Joseph the dream. I'm not going to tell you the dream. It's I'll paraphrase it, and you can go read it. It's in Genesis chapter 40. But they had a dream, and basically the way that he interpreted the dream is he said, for the cupbearer, he said, "You are going to be restored back to your position with Pharaoh in the next 3 days." And then to the baker, he said, "In the next 3 days, you're actually going to have your head cut off, and you're going to die." Okay, can you imagine being told the interpretation of the dream? And so as Joseph interpreted it, it happened, right? So Joseph was put, he gave the dream. The cupbearer was put back into his authority of being cupbearer, and the baker was killed. And here's what Joseph said to the cupbearer, verse 14. He said, "Only keep me in mind when it goes well for you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." So Joseph obviously was wanting to get out. And then in verse 15, it says, "For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the dungeon." So he's like, I've done nothing wrong. And so I think, he's discouraged. Obviously, he wants to get out. So you might be the same thing. I want out. Change my circumstances. God, help me. You might even be asking for help from people. And guess what happened? The cupbearer forgot about Joseph. So he gets out. He forgets about Joseph, and he's left to be there for some more time. Again, I want you to relate to Joseph as I'm sharing this story with you, because I know I can relate to Joseph in a lot of ways. I look at the process God has taken me through and that I'm even going through. Things are difficult. Things are hard. There's obstacles. But you know what? That's life. None of us want to feel difficulty. None of us want to feel obstacles. None of us want to go through hard times. We want peace. We want there to just be no friction. We want everything to be, nice and calm and everything good. But guys, we all know that that's not how life always goes. Fast forward that all of a sudden, Pharaoh had a dream. Pharaoh now has a dream. And so Joseph was in jail an additional 2 years after the cupbearer got out. And then in chapter 41, verse 1, it says, "Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile, and behold, from the Nile 7 cows came up, fine-looking, fat. They gazed in the marsh. Then behold, 7 other cows came up and were healthy and looked good and strong." But then he has another part of the dream where the cows are like anorexic, they're skinny, they're sick, and he wakes up troubled because he's like, I dreamed and I have no idea what's going on. And in the morning, his spirit was troubled, it says in verse 8. And so he sent messengers and called for all the soothsayer priests in Egypt. So soothsayers were like magicians and, psychics and, dream tellers. And he called for all of them and all the wise men, and he told them his dreams, but there was no one that could interpret for Pharaoh. Nobody. Then all of a sudden, the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, "I would make mention today of my own offenses." Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in the confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. Then we had a dream, and there's this young Hebrew youth who was there with us, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard, and he was able to interpret our dreams for us. And then in verse 13, verse 14, then Pharaoh said, call for Joseph immediately, and hurried him out of jail, brought him out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. Okay, he came to Pharaoh. And Joseph interpreted the dream. And basically the dream was, Pharaoh, the next 7 years are going to be a great economy. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to grow well. Everything's going to go good. Things are going to be amazing. And then the 7 years after that, the sick, anorexic, deathly looking animals and crops represent 7 years of famine, depression. There's going to be a recession economy. Things are going to be horrible. But the first 7 are going to be great. The next 7 are going to be horrible. So he interprets the dream, and what happens is Pharaoh is completely impressed with Joseph. And in verse 33, he says, so now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt as a tax in the 7 years of abundance. Then have them collect all the food of these good years when the economy is good, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and have them guard it. Let the food be used as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine. This is so powerful, guys, and I really want you to receive this and hear this, and I want you, I pray that it encourages your faith, and you literally feel a leap of faith inside of you right now. Verse 38, then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom there is a divine spirit? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all of this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you are. You shall be in charge of my entire house, and all of my people shall be obedient to you. Only regarding the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, since I have placed you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signature ring. Watch this, guys. Takes off his signature ring from his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of luxury and royalty and fine linen, and put a gold necklace around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed ahead of him, bow the knee. And he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, I'm the greatest of all, yet without your permission, Joseph, no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt to you. This really blew me away when I read this, because Joseph went through so many trials, so many tribulations, these obstacles, the hardships, the negativity, the betrayal, slavery, being sold, in the dungeon, being lied on. And one morning he woke up. And Joseph woke up probably that morning like any other morning. This sucks. I'm in prison. When am I going to get out? I'm scruffy. I smell. And I'm still going to get up and be faithful. But by the end of the day, he was made second in command of all of Egypt. He literally went from a morning where nothing was significant to by the end of the day. He went from being a prisoner in the morning to literally being second in command by the end of the day. And when I read this, here's what the Lord told me, and I want to encourage you in this. In a moment's time, your situation can change. In a moment's time, everything in your life can change. Are you ready for that? Are you remaining faithful? Are you trusting God? Are you continuing to be ready for God to show up? Regardless of what your circumstances are, regardless of what's going on around you, regardless how many people have done you wrong, regardless of the difficulties that you've experienced, your moment is on the horizon. Your moment is coming. Are you ready for it? In a moment's time like this, just like that, God can change everything, just like he did with Joseph. Can you imagine how Joseph felt, that he woke up a prisoner, and at the end of the day, he was in royalty. He was second in command of all of Egypt, which at the time was the modern world of everything. And he was in second command. And what's interesting was they didn't believe in God, his God. They didn't believe like the way that he believed. And yet Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the world at the time, promotes him to be second in command. And what the Lord told me was, he said, Justin, I can change everything about what you're going through. I can change your life. I can change your situation in a moment. The Lord can change your situation if you're listening to this right now in a moment. You can wake up one day one way and end the day completely in a different way. Are you ready? Are you trusting God? Are you believing him? Do you have the faith to believe that your circumstances in a moment, I even want you to say in a moment, can completely change? And when God spoke that to me and showed that to me, I was blown away, and it changed everything. But that's not where the story ends. So Joseph stores up the grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea until he stopped measuring it. Joseph prepared during that 7 years for the famine to come. Joseph, because of the wisdom of God and because he trusted the Lord, that he was preparing for what was to come. So the 7 years of plenty takes place. Well, then guess what? Then in verse 55, chapter 41, so when all the land of Egypt suffered famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, you shall do. So here you have Joseph in control, ruling over the world, knowing exactly what to do because he remained faithful to the Lord. Verse 57 says, then the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the earth. Okay? This is where it gets really good. So now Joseph is sitting on the throne, and guess who shows up to buy grain? His brothers. And guess what his brothers do? They walk in to where Joseph was, and guess what they do? They bow down. Just like the dream Joseph had 13 years previous, because now he's 30 when he was promoted to be second in command. So 13 years previous, he had this dream. And now the dream is coming to pass. The fulfillment of what God showed Joseph is now coming to pass 13 years later. Guys, just because God gives you a vision, you get a prophetic word, you get a dream, you know what you're called to do, doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, because what took place over that 13 years with Joseph? He needed to be processed. He needed to go through circumstances that were going to make him trust God, that were going to make him stronger, that were going to help him mature and grow in wisdom, that were going to prepare him for this moment. See, God gives you vision, but he doesn't show you the process you have to go through to get there. And that's where it's difficult, because we see the end result. We get excited. We get fired up. We're on our way to get there. And then boom, opposition happens. People take advantage of us. People, do us wrong. We fall down. Obstacles happen. Difficulties happen. We fail. And we're like, this isn't what I saw in the vision. Because if you saw that in the vision, you would have never pursued the end result. God doesn't show along the way what's going to happen. And this is laid out in the entire Bible that you can see it this way. And so here's Joseph, verse 6, chapter 42. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land, and he was the one who sold grain to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. See, they couldn't recognize Joseph. But verse 7 says, when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them, and he kind of started to play with them, started putting them through tests and this and that and the other. He wanted to kind of see what was going on. Now, obviously, he's very wise at this point. He's messing with them. He's playing with them. And in verse 9, it says this, and Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, and he said to them, you are spies. You have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. So now he's playing with them. Because I always wondered why he kind of messed with them and played with them. Maybe he was still holding a little grudge against them, but I don't think so. But he remembered the dream. Okay, he remembered the dream, and so he began to test them. He began to play with them, and then he sent for his parents to come. So then guess what his parents do? They come and bow down to him as well. So now the dream is fulfilled. And when they start messing with him, the brothers get guilty. Verse 21, it says, now they said to one another, truly we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. For that reason, this distress has happened to us. So now they think that they're about to be killed because now Joseph is messing around with them. And so they're going through this process, this, that, and the other. But I really believe that Joseph, before he revealed himself to the brothers, he wanted there to be a certain, point that he revealed himself. And so then later on I want to give this to you, and I'm going to tie it all together. So I appreciate you sticking with me, because this is powerful, especially if you're going through something and you can relate to what I'm saying. I want you to reach out to me, because when this spoke to me, it really empowered me and gave me faith to believe that what God is doing is for a purpose and a reason. Verse 4 of chapter 45, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold to Egypt. Verse 5 says, now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves. This is so powerful. Because you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to save your lives. Wow. And then in verse 7 it says, so God sent me ahead of you to ensure for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all the household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. And so at this moment, Joseph realized that it wasn't all the hardship that he went through, being sold into slavery, being thrown in the pit, going to Potiphar's house, being lied. It all had to happen. Think about this. If Joseph would have remained in Potiphar's house, he would have never have been in the jail to interpret the dream that opened the door for him to be in front of Pharaoh, to interpret his dream, to sit on the throne, to basically see everybody through this famine, and to save not only the lives of everybody, but his family. This is so powerful, because you know what? In the midst of all your trouble, your trying times, your obstacles, your difficulties, God has a plan for you. Even in Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that God causes all things to work together for the good, to those that love him and have been called according to his purpose. If you serve the Lord, if you're being faithful, if you love the Lord, I'm telling you right now, every obstacle, every difficulty, every wrongdoing, every person that's taking advantage of you, God is using it for a purpose. If you will remain faithful, if you will continue to move forward and you will continue to trust God, there's going to come a day where that vision, that prophetic word, that thing that God has for you comes to pass, and you're going to be able to look back like Joseph did and said, you know what? All this was for such a time as this. Every difficulty, every hardship, everything that I went through was to put me right here, right now. And so I want to encourage you that if God could do it for Joseph, he can do it for you. Just believe. Just believe that God would allow Joseph to go through all this difficulty and all this hardship to get him right to where he needed him to be, in that prison, so that he could be right in front of Pharaoh, so he could be promoted to second in command, so he could see the world through that famine, and to be able to see the vision of his brothers and his father and his parents bowing down for that vision to come to pass. See, it was never about Joseph. It was about God using Joseph to save the world. So I want to encourage you right now. I want to pray for you, because I know for many of you, it's very difficult right now. For many of you, you're like, what's going on? Why is it happening? And where are you, God? And you know what? It's normal to feel that way. But I want to encourage you, just like I can read and see with Joseph, God was with Joseph and he's with you. So Lord, I just pray for every person that's listening right now, God, that you would encourage each person and that you'd let them know that you use circumstances, you use obstacles, you use hardships, you use difficulties, Lord, to get us where you're calling us to go. There is purpose in your pain. There's purpose in your pain. For those that are listening, there's purpose in your pain. And Lord, I just pray that you'd give us the ability to continue to move forward through the process to get to the promise. because Lord, like Joseph, he had to endure. He had to push forward. Even when it didn't make sense, even when it was difficult, even when it was hard, even when he felt alone, God, you never left him nor forsook him. And those that are on this, listening to this right now, God, I know that you have not left us nor forsaken us. And I just pray for those that are listening to be encouraged right now, Lord, strengthened right now. And God, that in a moment's time, Lord, you can change everything about our circumstances, everything about, Lord, where we're at and what we're going through. And I pray that you would do it, Lord, and that you would do it for your glory. God, use the circumstances and the hardships, God, for your purpose and your plans. And Lord, I just pray that you would just continue to give us what we need to move forward and trust in you. In Jesus' name, amen. I want you to be encouraged today. For those that are listening, God is with you. He is for you, and you will see the promise come to pass. Don't give up and continue to believe like Joseph, so that one day you can look back and say it was all for this purpose right here, right now. I hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. It really blessed me and spoke to me, and I wanted to share it with you today. If it did bless you, share it with somebody, because I'm sure you know somebody else that might be going through some difficulties that need to hear this as well. And if it really blessed you, reach out to me. Find me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever at The Official Justin Ford. Feel free to reach out anytime, and I want to hear from you. If this message blessed you, you can also email me, justin@justinfordunleashed.com. And I'm here to encourage you and help you, because I'm on the journey just like you are. And so I appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. If you're loving the show, leave us a review. Again, I'd love to hear from you. Follow me on social media. This episode was brought to you by my friends over at Next Door Lending. Next Door Lending is not just our sponsor of the show. They are our personal lender at the Justin Ford Real Estate Team. This is who works with all of our buyers. They have over 1,000 5-star reviews, a perfect A+ Better Business Bureau rating. And guys, they have the products and services to help you in any program or situation that you're in. Give them a call today. If you're a buyer looking to get pre-approved and purchase a home this year, call my friends over at Next Door Lending. If you are a homeowner looking to refinance and take some cash out, call my friends over at Next Door Lending. And if you're a real estate agent looking for a great lender partner, call my friends over at Next Door Lending today at 888-885-3667 or visit their website at nextdoorlending.com. Guys, I hope this episode really blessed you today. And I want you to always remember two things. Number one, it's not how you start. What matters is how you finish. Number two, with God, all things are possible. God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.